In the depths of space, where silence reigns eternal and stars burn with ancient fire, a lie was being told. The Galactic Council chambers stretched before them like a cathedral of judgment, all soaring crystalline spires and floating platforms that hummed with the collective breath of 1,000 civilizations. Here, beneath the watchful gaze of species that had conquered death itself, humanity sat and smiled. Commander Jackson Cross adjusted his simple cloth uniform, cotton. They'd told the aliens grown from Earth's soil and watched as the assembled delegates whispered among themselves in languages that predated human civilization by millennia. His weathered hands, calloused from what appeared to be manual labor, rested calmly on the primitive wooden table before him. To any observer, he was exactly what he appeared to be, a representative of a backward, barely spacefaring species that had stumbled into galactic society through pure luck. The lie was perfect. It had to be. Across the vast chamber, Kathmori, High Chancellor of the Hegemony, studied the human delegation with barely concealed disdain. Her 6 arms moved in elegant patterns as she communicated with her subordinates, a silent language of gestures that spoke volumes about her opinion of these creatures. Her species, the Zukari, had achieved faster-than-light travel when Earth's continents were still forming. They had mastered genetic manipulation, consciousness transfer, and the very manipulation of space-time itself. And now they were expected to treat these primitive mammals as equals. The human petition for protected status has been reviewed, Kathmori announced, her voice carrying across the chamber with artificial amplification. Their homeworld shows signs of ecological damage. Their technology is quaint, and their population appears to be struggling with basic resource management. Cross nodded earnestly, playing his part to perfection. We appreciate the Council's consideration. Earth's people are simple, but we're learning. Your guidance would be invaluable. Behind him, Dr. Anne Bishop, introduced as humanity's chief medicine woman, kept her expression carefully humble while her mind raced through calculations that would have impressed even the hegemony's finest mathematicians. The irony wasn't lost on her. She held 17 advanced degrees and had personally designed the quantum entanglement networks that now secretly connected every human colony across 3 spiral arms. But here she wore rough-spun clothes and carried what appeared to be primitive medical herbs. The masquerade had begun 12 years ago, when humanity's long-range scouts had first detected the Galactic Council's survey probes approaching Earth. In those crucial months, entire cities had been carefully concealed, technology levels artificially reduced, and a carefully crafted image of a struggling pre-industrial civilization had been constructed. The Council's own arrogance had done the rest. They saw what they expected to see and looked no deeper. Your species shows potential, announced Veltar, the insectoid representative of the Symmetry Collective. His mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement. Perhaps in a few millennia you might even achieve basic stellar engineering. Until then, the Council will consider your request for protectorate status. Cross bowed deeply. We are honored by your generosity. As the session continued, neither Kathmori nor her allies noticed the almost imperceptible delay in Cross's responses, the brief pause that occurred as his questions were transmitted across the galaxy to Earth's true leadership, and their carefully crafted answers transmitted back. They didn't see the molecular-scale transmitters woven into his primitive clothing, or recognize that his unremarkable appearance was the result of the most sophisticated biological modification humanity had ever achieved. They saw a simple soldier from a backward world. They had no idea they were looking at one of the most dangerous human beings who had ever lived. Far from the Council chambers, in the void between stars, something waited. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Redemption, watching the tactical display with eyes that had seen too much war. Around her, the ship's crew moved with the fluid precision of humans born in zero gravity. Their bodies adapted, their minds enhanced, their loyalty absolute. The Redemption itself was a masterpiece of human engineering, 2 kilometers of hardened titanium carbide composite, powered by controlled micro-singularities and armed with weapons that could crack moons. The Galactic Council had no idea it existed. Status report, Morrison commanded, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. All stealth systems nominal, replied Lieutenant Commander Rivera, her fingers dancing across controls that existed in both physical and neural space. The gravitational masking is holding steady. Even if they passed within 1,000 kilometers, their sensors would read empty space. Morrison nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant stars where she knew the Council's forces were massing. 3,000 ships representing the combined might of 17 civilizations that had never known defeat. They were preparing for what they believed would be a simple pacification campaign. The conquest of a primitive world that had dared to resist their generous offer of subjugation. They had no idea what was coming for them. "Ma'am," Chief Warrant Officer Hayes called out from his station, "we're receiving transmission from the surface teams. Operation Shepherd's Crook is proceeding on schedule." Morrison allowed herself a cold smile. Shepherd's Crook, the systematic evacuation of Earth's primitive population to hidden colonies scattered across a dozen star systems. To the Council's sensors, it would appear that plague and natural disasters were decimating the human race. In reality, humanity was dispersing to prepared positions throughout the galaxy, ready to strike when the moment came. "What about the deep space assets?" Morrison asked. "Construction fleets are holding position in the void sectors," Hayes replied. "All shipyards remain undetected. We could have another 1,000 vessels combat-ready within 6 months if needed." 1,000 vessels. Morrison thought of the massive automated factories hidden in the spaces between star systems, of the self-replicating mining platforms that had been quietly strip-mining dead worlds for decades, of the generation ships disguised as asteroids that had been seeding human presence throughout the galaxy for over a century. The Council thought they were dealing with a single world. They had no conception of the true scope of human civilization. In the Council chambers, Cross was concluding another perfectly calibrated display of humble gratitude when the first warning reached him through his neural implants. The message was brief, encrypted in ways that would take the Council's finest cryptographers millennia to break. "The hour approaching. All pieces are in position." He maintained his expression of earnest simplicity while his mind processed the implications. Soon, very soon, the masquerade would end. The Council would learn what humanity had been building in the darkness between stars. They would discover that the primitive species they'd sought to protect was, in fact, the apex predator of the galaxy. But not yet. Not quite yet. "Honored delegates," Cross said, rising from his wooden chair with apparent effort, "I must return to my ship. My people grow anxious when I'm away too long. We are a nervous species." Keth Mori waved dismissively. "Of course. Rest assured, human, that the Council will reach a decision regarding your fate within the year. Until then you will remain under our protection." Cross bowed again, deeper this time. "Your wisdom guides us all." As he left the chamber, several delegates shared what they believed were subtle communications about the amusing primitiveness of the human representative. They noted his awkward gait, his simple clothing, his obvious unfamiliarity with basic galactic technology. They saw exactly what they were supposed to see. None of them noticed that Cross's clumsy movements followed a pattern, a complex mathematical sequence that would have been recognizable to any advanced civilization as a military formation code. None of them realized that his apparent nervousness was actually the controlled excitement of a predator preparing to strike, and none of them suspected that every word they'd spoken, every gesture they'd made, every technological display they'd shown off, had been recorded and analyzed by human intelligence systems that made their own computing networks look like children's toys. In the shadows of space, the trap was closing. The human delegation's ship, the modestly named Explorer, drifted away from the Council station with what appeared to be primitive ion drives sputtering inefficiently. Inside, the facade finally dropped. Cross shed his primitive clothing, revealing the sophisticated bodysuit beneath a second skin that monitored his every biological function and connected him to the vast network of human intelligence. His carefully maintained appearance of age and weakness evaporated as enhancement drugs flooded his system, restoring him to the peak physical condition that had made him one of humanity's finest soldiers. "Report," he commanded, his voice now carrying the steel that had been carefully hidden from alien ears. Dr. Bishop, similarly transformed, looked up from a holographic display that showed the positions of every ship in the Council fleet. "We've mapped their entire defensive network. Their shields are impressive, but they're designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. They have no defense against what we're planning. And their ground forces? Overwhelming by conventional standards," Bishop admitted. "But they've never fought a species that views warfare as an art form. Their tactical databases contain the histories of 1,000 conquered civilizations. None of those civilizations had our advantages. Cross studied the data, his enhanced mind processing scenarios at superhuman speed. The Council's forces were indeed massive, enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds, enough ground troops to occupy a solar system, but they were designed to fight the kind of warfare that had dominated the galaxy for millennia: massive fleets engaging in direct confrontation, overwhelming force applied against fixed targets, the slow, grinding conquest of helpless populations. They had never fought ghosts. Status of the deep assets? Cross asked. Shadow Fleet is holding position in parallel space, Bishop replied. They won't detect us until we decloak. By then it'll be too late. Parallel space. One of humanity's greatest achievements, and one that had required sacrificing an entire star system to perfect. The ability to slip sideways through dimensions, moving through the gaps between reality itself. The Council's finest scientists still believed faster than light travel required either massive expenditures of energy or dangerous manipulation of space-time. They had no idea that humanity had learned to step outside the universe entirely. And the colonies. All reporting ready, the evacuations are complete. Earth appears to be suffering a massive plague outbreak, exactly as planned. Cross allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Operation Shepherd's Crook had been decades in the planning. Every human settlement that the Council knew about was being systematically destroyed by carefully orchestrated disasters, plague outbreaks, asteroid impacts, stellar radiation, all faked with technology so advanced that even the Council's sensors would read genuine catastrophe. Humanity was appearing to die just as the Council prepared to save them. In reality, the human race was spreading like a virus through dimensions the Council didn't even know existed. "Sir," came a voice from the ship's communication officer. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Morrison." Cross nodded. "Put her through." Morrison's image materialized in the center of the cabin, transmitted through quantum entanglement from her flagship in deep space. "Jackson. How did our performance go?" "They bought every second of it," Cross replied. Kolamori actually seemed sympathetic by the end. "She's convinced we're a dying species in need of their guidance." "Perfect. Because in approximately 48 hours she's going to learn exactly how wrong she is." Cross felt the familiar chill of pre-combat anticipation. "The Council's moving?" "Full mobilization. 3 fleets. Approaching Earth from different vectors. They're planning what they call a mercy intervention. They'll destroy what they think are the plague outbreaks, establish orbital control, and begin the process of inducting us into their hegemony. And we'll be ready?" Morrison's smile was cold as vacuum. "Jackson, we've been ready for this war since before their species learned to use tools. The only question now is whether we kill them quickly, or whether we make them suffer first." As the transmission ended, Cross turned to look at the viewscreen showing the retreating Council station. Somewhere in those gleaming spires, Kethmori was probably congratulating herself on humanity's impending salvation. She had no way of knowing that she was looking at the last 48 hours of galactic civilization as she knew it. The masquerade was ending, and humanity was about to remind the universe why apex predators hunt alone. In the space between heartbeats, between one breath and the next, war came to the galaxy. Krithmori stood before the massive tactical display in the hegemony's war room, watching as her fleets moved into position around the small blue world that had so recently captured the Council's sympathy. Earth hung before them like a diseased jewel, its surface scarred by what appeared to be massive plague outbreaks, its primitive satellites dark and silent, its population apparently dying by the millions. It was, she reflected, a mercy that they had arrived in time to save what remained of humanity. "Fleet positioning confirmed," reported Admiral Yexai, his tentacled form rippling with satisfaction. "First Fleet has achieved orbital superiority over the primary continent. Second Fleet is moving to contain the plague zones. Third Fleet stands ready to provide humanitarian support." "Any response from the surface?" Korfmori asked. "Scattered radio transmissions," Yexai replied dismissively. "Primitive distress calls. Mostly. Some appear to be requesting aid. Nothing that suggests organized resistance." Korfmori nodded, feeling a genuine pang of sympathy for the doomed species below. Humanity had shown such promise during their embassy to the Council. Cross had been crude but earnest, clearly doing his best to represent his dying people with dignity. It was tragic that they had arrived too late to prevent the catastrophe that was consuming their world. "Begin the intervention," she commanded. "Target the plague zones first. Sterilize the infection. Then we can begin rescue operations for the survivors." 300 million kilometers away, in the void between Mars and Jupiter, death stirred. Admiral Morrison watched the Council fleets take their positions with the cold satisfaction of a chess master watching an opponent walk into checkmate. Around her, the bridge of the redemption hummed with barely contained energy, as humanity's true fleet prepared to decloak 1,000-meter dreadnoughts powered by contained singularities. Carrier vessels that spawned autonomous fighter craft like angry Honorts, weapons platforms that could reach across star systems to deliver precise, devastating strikes. The Council had brought 3,000 ships to conquer a single world. Humanity had brought 30,000 to defend a galaxy. "All vessels report ready," announced Captain Torres from the tactical station. "Shadow Fleet is holding position in parallel space. Deep strike assets are locked onto priority targets. The orbital platforms around Saturn are fully operational." Morrison nodded, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to process the flood of tactical data in real time. Every Council ship was tagged, tracked, and targeted. Every possible escape route was covered. Every contingency had been planned for. "What about the ground assets?" she asked. "Shepherd teams are in position," Torres replied. "Every major population center on Earth has been evacuated and replaced with holographic projections. The Council's own sensors are feeding them false data about plague outbreaks and mass casualties." Morrison allowed herself a cold smile. The Council prided itself on its advanced technology, never realizing that humanity had spent centuries learning to turn that technology against itself. Every sensor they'd used to scan Earth had been quietly compromised, fed carefully crafted lies that painted a picture of a dying world instead of a carefully orchestrated evacuation. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Hayes from the communications station, "we're receiving surrender demands from the Council fleet. They're ordering all human forces to stand down and prepare for humanitarian intervention." "Response?" Morrison asked. Hayes grinned. "Standard protocol, ma'am. We're broadcasting weak panic transmissions from the surface, begging for help, offering no resistance." "Perfect. Let them think they were saving a helpless species right up until the moment they learned the truth." "Ma'am," Torres announced suddenly, his voice tight with urgency. "Council First Fleet is beginning bombardment of the African continent. They're targeting what they think are plague zones." Morrison's blood turned to ice. Even though she knew the attacks were hitting empty holographic projections, the sight of alien weapons firing on Earth's surface triggered something primal and furious in her enhanced nervous system. For all their planning, for all their preparation, there was something viscerally wrong about watching enemy fire strike the cradle of humanity. "All units," she commanded, her voice carrying across the quantum communication network to every human ship in the system. "This is Admiral Morrison. The enemy has fired on Earth. You are authorized to engage." And with those words, the masquerade ended forever. The first sign that something was wrong came when SCI-FI's sensors detected massive gravitational anomalies throughout the solar system. Space itself seemed to be shifting, as if reality was being folded and twisted by invisible hands. "What in the void's name?" he began, just as the first human ship decloaked directly above his flagship. The UES Nemesis materialized out of nowhere like a metallic mountain, its hull black as space and bristling with weapons that shouldn't have been possible. As SCI-FI watched in growing horror, more ships appeared. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, emerging from parallel dimensions with the fluid grace of apex predators emerging from the shadows. "Impossible." Korvac Mori breathed, staring at the tactical display as it updated to show the true scope of the human fleet. "The sensors showed nothing. Nothing." "Chancellor," SCI-FI reported, his voice shaking, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. These ships, their power output is off the scale. Some of them are reading as powerful as small stars." On the main view screen, a human face appeared. A woman with steel-gray eyes and the kind of expression that promised violence. When she spoke, her voice was calm, precise, and absolutely terrifying. "I am Admiral Kate Morrison of the United Earth Space Forces," she announced. "You have fired upon the sovereign territory of humanity. You have exactly 60 seconds to withdraw from this system before we respond in kind." Hewitt Maury found her voice first. "Admiral Morrison, there seems to be some misunderstanding. We are here on a humanitarian mission. Your world is dying. We're here to help." Morrison's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. "Our world is fine, Chancellor. What's dying is your understanding of reality." 50 seconds. In the depths of space, ancient weapons systems that had slumbered for centuries began to wake. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, massive fabrication complexes that had been hidden since humanity's first expansion into space hummed to life. Asteroid mining platforms that had been disguised as natural debris for decades suddenly revealed their true nature as mobile weapons platforms. The rings of Saturn themselves began to move, revealing a vast network of defensive installations that had been built into the ring system over the course of 2 centuries. "My God," whispered Yexende, as his sensors finally began to penetrate the layers of deception that had hidden humanity's true capabilities. "They've militarized their entire solar system. Every moon, every asteroid, every piece of debris, it's all weaponized." "How long?" Korth Mori demanded. "How long have they been preparing for this?" Morrison's voice answered over the open channel, as if she'd heard the question. "Since our first radio telescope detected your civilization 800 years ago, Chancellor, we've been watching you, learning from you, preparing for the day you would come for us." 800 years. The number hit Kelton Mori like a physical blow. While the Council had been expanding through space, conquering primitive civilizations and adding them to their hegemony, humanity had been quietly, methodically, turning their entire stellar neighborhood into a fortress. Every primitive technology the Council had observed had been carefully crafted deception. Every struggling colony had been a hidden military base. Every plea for help had been intelligence gathering. 30 seconds. Morrison announced. Admiral Kithmori tried again, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Surely we can discuss this. The Council has no desire for war with humanity. We believed you needed our help." 20 seconds. Around the Council fleet, space itself began to change. The stars seemed to shift and waver as massive gravitational lenses activated throughout the system. The very fabric of space-time was being weaponized, turning the void itself into a weapon pointed at their hearts. 10 seconds. Kathamori made her choice. "All fleets, emergency jump. Get us out of here." But when Yexhai tried to activate their faster-than-light drives, nothing happened. The space around them had become thick, as if reality itself was refusing to let them leave. "Dimensional anchor," Morrison explained helpfully. "We've locked down local space-time. Nothing gets in or out without our permission." 5 seconds. And then, with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, humanity showed the galaxy what 800 years of preparation had built. The attack came from everywhere and nowhere. Weapons that fired bursts of contained vacuum, creating pockets of absolute nothingness that simply erased sections of Council ships from existence. Gravitational cannons that twisted space-time into weapons, crushing vessels like insects. Energy weapons that didn't just destroy their targets, but converted them into exotic matter that then exploded with the force of supernovas. But perhaps most terrifying of all were the autonomous fighter craft that swarmed from the human carriers, machines that moved with inhuman precision and seemed to anticipate their targets' actions before they made them. Each fighter was barely larger than a human being, but they flew with the coordination of a hive mind and struck with the fury of living beings defending their young. In the first 30 seconds of combat, the Council's first fleet lost a third of its ships. "Return fire!" Yexhai screamed over the chaos. "All units, return fire." The Council's weapons were indeed impressive. Energy beams that could crack planets, missiles that could chase their targets across star systems, shields that could deflect the fury of stars themselves. Under any other circumstances, they would have been devastating. But humanity had spent 8 centuries studying Council technology. Every weapon they fired was met by perfectly calibrated countermeasures. Every shield was bypassed by frequencies that targeted their exact resonance points. Every tactic they employed was countered by defenders who had run this battle in simulation millions of times. How are they doing this? Queth Mori demanded, watching in horror as her supposedly superior forces were systematically dismantled. Their technology should be centuries behind ours. Morrison's image reappeared on their screens, and now her expression had shifted from cold professionalism to something far more dangerous, the look of a predator that had finally dropped its disguise. "Chancellor," she said, "you made the same mistake that every dominant species makes. You assumed that intelligence and advancement were the same thing. You saw our primitive technology and concluded we were inferior. You never considered that we might be hiding our true capabilities." As if to demonstrate her point, the space around the Council fleet suddenly filled with what appeared to be solid matter, a crystalline structure that seemed to grow from nothing, expanding at impossible speed until it had encased the entire enemy formation in a cage of diamond-hard force. "You see," Morrison continued, "humanity has a different approach to survival than most species. We don't just adapt to our environment, we adapt our environment to us. We don't just build technology, we become technology. And we don't just prepare for war, we turn war itself into a science." Inside the crystalline cage, the Council ships found themselves completely immobilized. Their weapons fired uselessly against barriers that absorbed energy and converted it to structural reinforcement. Their attempts to ram through the walls only made the prison stronger. "What do you want?" Queth Mori asked, her voice breaking with the realization that her fleets, the combined might of 17 civilizations, were completely helpless. Morrison's answer came not as words but as a flood of data transmitted directly into their ship's computers. Images of human colonies spread across the galaxy, technical specifications for weapons that violated everything the Council thought they knew about physics, star charts showing human presence in systems the Council hadn't even discovered yet. But most shocking of all were the recordings. Surveillance footage from Council worlds showing human operatives moving freely through their societies, gathering intelligence, mapping defenses, preparing for this very moment. "We are everywhere, Chancellor," Morrison explained. "We have been watching your people for centuries. We know your strength, your weaknesses, your deepest fears. We know which worlds you love most, which leaders you trust, which technologies you depend on." The implications hit Queth Mori like a tsunami. If humanity had been this far ahead for so long, if they had been infiltrating Council space for centuries, if they had been preparing for this war since before the first Council ships had even detected Earth— "You're not the primitive species at all," she whispered. "We are." Morrison nodded slowly. "And now, Chancellor, you're going to help us prove it to the rest of the galaxy." As the crystalline cage began to move, carrying the captured Council fleets toward an unknown destination, one truth became brutally clear. The age of Council dominance was ending, and something far more dangerous was about to take its place. In the final hour, when all masks fall away and truth stands naked in the void, the universe learns what monsters look like when they smile. The hegemony's capital world, Nexus Prime, had stood unconquered for 7,000 years. Its orbital fortresses had repelled invasion fleets that blackened the stars. Its planetary shields had withstood the fury of dying suns turned into weapons. Its defensive fleet was the pride of 17 civilizations, a force so mighty that entire species had surrendered at the mere sight of its approach. Today, it fell to Earth's children in 18 minutes. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Redemption, watching through real-time feeds as human assault teams moved through the corridors of Nexus Prime's governing complex with surgical precision. No alarms rang, no defenders rallied. The few Council security forces they encountered simply stopped as if their nervous systems had forgotten how to function. "Neurological warfare," the Dr. Bishop explained from her position at the tactical console, her voice carrying a note of scientific fascination even in the midst of battle. "We've spent decades studying Council biology. Every species in their hegemony has specific neurotransmitter vulnerabilities. A carefully modulated electromagnetic pulse can induce anything from temporary paralysis to selective memory erasure." Morrison nodded, watching as another group of Zorkari guards collapsed into peaceful unconsciousness at the approach of human infiltrators. "Casualties?" "Minimal on both sides," Bishop reported. We're using non-lethal takedowns wherever possible. The goal is subjugation, not extermination. Subjugation. The word carried weight that Morrison wasn't entirely comfortable with, but the strategic necessity was clear. Humanity had spent 8 centuries preparing for this moment. 800 years of careful planning, technological advancement, and strategic positioning. The galaxy would learn to fear them, yes, but it would also learn to respect them. Or so she hoped. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Hayes from communications, "we're receiving surrender requests from 14 Council member worlds. They're offering unconditional capitulation in exchange for protection." Morrison felt a grim satisfaction. Word of humanity's true capabilities was spreading across the galaxy at the speed of quantum entanglement, carried by automated transmission networks that the Council had never known existed. Within hours, every major civilization would know that the primitive species they had sought to protect was actually the apex predator of the galaxy. "Standard response," she ordered. "Conditional acceptance. Full technological disclosure, military integration under human command, and immediate cessation of all expansionist activities. Anyone who refuses gets the Nexus Prime treatment." 3 hours later, in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's most secure facility, Commander Cross stood in the Council's inner sanctum, surrounded by the holographic displays that had once shown the extent of their galactic empire. Now those same displays showed something very different: the systematic collapse of Council authority as world after world submitted to human demands rather than faced the alternative. Before him, Kith Mori knelt in formal surrender, her 6 arms bound with restraints that were more symbolic than necessary. The neurological dampening field that surrounded her made physical resistance impossible, but Cross could see in her eyes that the fight had gone out of her anyway. She had seen what humanity was capable of. She understood that resistance was not just futile. It was evolutionary suicide. "You played your part well," she said, her voice carrying a bitter admiration. "The confused primitive, struggling to understand our advanced society, you must have been laughing at us the entire time." Cross removed his tactical helmet, revealing features that were sharper and more predatory than the soft, confused face he had worn during their diplomatic meetings. His eyes held the cold intelligence of a species that had turned survival into an art form. "Not laughing," he corrected. "Studying. Every gesture you made, every word you spoke, every technological demonstration you provided, all of it was data. We learned more about your capabilities in those few hours than your own intelligence services knew about ours after centuries of observation." "Why?" Twithmori asked. "Why hide? Why pretend to be weak when you could have simply demanded our submission from the beginning?" Cross was quiet for a long moment, looking out through the chamber's massive windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, human fleets were taking control of strategic positions throughout the galaxy. Somewhere out there, the children of Earth were claiming their inheritance. "Because," he said finally, "we needed to know if you were worth saving." The words hit Queth Mori like a physical blow. "Saving? Your species, Chancellor. Your entire civilization. We could have exterminated every Council world years ago. Our deep space assets have been in position since before your grandfather was born. We could have turned your sons into weapons, poisoned your atmospheres, deleted your genetic codes from the universe itself." Cross turned to look at her directly, and in his eyes she saw something that was somehow worse than hatred or contempt. She saw pity. "But we chose not to. Do you know why?" Queth Mori could only shake her head. "Because we've met true evil in the void between stars, Chancellor. We've fought wars against machine intelligences that sought to convert all organic life into computational substrate. We've stood against hive minds that wanted to absorb every individual consciousness into their collective. We've faced entities that viewed the universe itself as nothing more than raw material for their incomprehensible projects." Cross walked to the window, his reflection ghostly against the starfield. "Your people are conquerors. Yes. You're arrogant and domineering, and convinced of your own superiority. But you're not monsters. You have art, philosophy, love, hope. You're capable of growth, of change, of redemption. So we've decided to give you the chance to prove it." The implications of his words slowly dawned on her. "You're not just conquering us," Kith Mori realized. "You're recruiting us." Cross nodded. "The galaxy is a dangerous place, Chancellor. There are threats out there that would make our little war look like a children's game. Threats that require the combined might of every civilized species to face. And you expect us to simply follow you? After this demonstration of your power, I expect you to be intelligent enough to recognize reality, Cross replied. Humanity is the apex predator of this galaxy. That's simply a fact of nature now. You can either adapt to that reality and find your place in the new order, or you can rage against it and be replaced by species that are more pragmatic. He gestured to the displays around them showing the real-time status of human operations across Council space. 70% of your member worlds have already submitted. The rest will follow within days. The age of Council dominance is over, Chancellor. The question is, what role will your people play in what comes next? Far from Nexus Prime in the cold depths of intergalactic space, something stirred that would make their entire conversation irrelevant. Admiral Morrison felt the disturbance before her instruments detected. A ripple in space-time that made her enhanced nervous system scream warnings. Around her, the bridge crew of the Redemption suddenly grew tense as proximity alarms began to sound. "Report," she commanded, her voice cutting through the sudden chaos. "Ma'am," called out Captain Torres, his face pale as he studied the incoming data. "We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies at the edge of the system. Something big is coming through hyperspace." "Council reinforcements?" Morrison asked. "Negative. These energy signatures, they don't match anything in our databases. Ma'am, whatever's coming, it's not from this galaxy." Morrison felt ice form in her stomach. For 8 centuries, humanity had prepared for war with the Galactic Council. They had anticipated every possible contingency, planned for every potential response. But they had always assumed that the Council represented the peak of local galactic civilization. The possibility that there might be something else out there, something worse, had been a theoretical concern at best. "All units, battle stations," she ordered. "Recall all assault teams, full defensive posture." "Ma'am," Torres continued, his voice shaking slightly, "the gravitational disturbance is increasing. Whatever's coming through, it's massive. Dreadnought class at minimum." "How massive?" Torres checked his readings again, as if hoping they might have changed. "Ma'am, reading the gravitational signature of something approximately the size of a moon." "A moon?" Morrison closed her eyes and accessed her neural implants connecting directly to the human fleet's tactical network. In the span of seconds, she absorbed status reports from every ship under her command, analyzed their combat readiness, and calculated their odds of survival against an unknown threat of that magnitude. The numbers were not encouraging. "Contact Commander Cross," she ordered. "Tell him we may have a problem." The transmission reached Cross just as he was concluding his conversation with Kethmari. "Admiral," he answered through his neural implant. "Jackson, we've got incoming. Unknown vessels, massive scale, non-local origin. How quickly can you extract from Nexus Prime?" Cross felt the familiar chill of impending combat, but this time it was tinged with something else. Uncertainty. Humanity had spent so long preparing to fight the Council that they had never seriously considered what they would do if something else showed up to the party. 5 minutes to extraction," he replied. "What are we looking at?" "Unknown. But Jackson, I think our little war with the Council may have attracted some unwanted attention." As if summoned by her words, space itself suddenly tore open at the edge of the system. What emerged was not a ship in any conventional sense, but rather a structure that seemed to be built from crystallized spacetime itself. A geometric impossibility that hurt to look at directly and radiated power signatures that registered as small stars on their sensors. "My God," Kothomori whispered, staring at the tactical displays as more of the impossible vessels emerged from whatever dimension they had traveled through. "The architects. They've come back." Cross spun to face her. "You know what these things are?" "Legends," she said, her voice barely audible. "Stories passed down from the earliest days of galactic civilization. They were supposed to be extinct, destroyed in the wars that preceded the formation of the Council." "What do they want?" Kethmori looked at him with eyes that held the terror of racial memory. "Everything. They view the universe as raw material for their grand design. Every star, every world, every living being, All of it is nothing more than components to be harvested and reshaped according to their vision. And as if to confirm her words, the lead architect vessel began to move toward the inner system with the inexorable certainty of a natural force. All units, Morrison's voice crackled across the human fleet's communication network. This is Admiral Morrison. We have contact with unknown hostiles. Primary mission parameters have changed. This is now a survival scenario. Cross felt the weight of 800 years of human preparation shifting beneath his feet. Everything they had built, everything they had planned, everything they had sacrificed to achieve dominance over the galaxy. All of it might be about to become irrelevant in the face of something that made their own apex predator status look like the posturing of children. "Chancellor," he said, turning back to Kothmori, "it looks like you're about to get that chance at redemption sooner than expected." "What do you mean?" Cross began activating his extraction beacon, knowing that within minutes he would be aboard a human vessel racing to face the unknown. "I mean that humanity and the Council are about to discover whether our new alliance can survive its first real test." "Alliance?" Kothmori asked. Cross looked at her one last time before the extraction beam began to take hold. "Did you think we conquered you so that we could rule over empty worlds? Chancellor, we're going to need every ship, every soldier, every strategic mind we can muster for what's coming." "And what is coming?" As Cross disappeared in a shimmer of directed energy, his final words lingered in the air: "The real war." In the depths of space, ancient enemies stirred and the galaxy held its breath. The architect vessel's approach triggered response protocols that had been dormant for millennia. Deep beneath the surface of Nexus Prime, automated systems that predated the Council itself began to wake. Ancient weapons platforms hidden in the dark matter between stars powered up for the first time in geological ages. And across the galaxy, species that had never worked together suddenly found themselves united by the simple desire to continue existing. But whether that unity would be enough to face what was coming remained to be seen. For in the end, apex predators only remained at the top until something hungrier came along. And the architects had been hungry for a very long time.